Okay, what the hell? I got to get back to Shelley and James Wood's Hyundai, because I keep sending her a attachment. She can't open it. Go figure.
The
Maybe I'll
things
just
you do.
forward the email to her from the other dealer with the attachment that's in it. Maybe that way you can open it.
The things you do to try and get a deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, buddy. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, if it's okay with you, let's talk about uh, the Great Recession in '07, '08,
And oh
and I
no,
guess in '09. Yeah.
yeah, it
And what the,
started at the end of '07 and went for quite a while.
yeah, well, I remember we had to move as a family because it was so bad out in Arizona.
Don't know what to tell you. I believe one of your questions was, how did I survive the Great Recession? Well, I'm not sure that I fucking did.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see. The Great Recession, I started seeing signs of it in the latter part of 2007 because I noticed that sales were starting to stagnate a little bit. They weren't declining dramatically yet, but they were stagnating.
And you were at the Acura dealership
I was
with,
in North Scottsdale at that time.
yeah.
And, every week I would track my day supply of cars and my incoming inventory, what I had on hand, what I was selling. And so I always knew what my running 90-day total was. And on every model, it was starting to edge up a little bit for the number of cars that I had. By April, I knew that I was really screwed because they just kept sending TLs or wanting to send TLs like we were still selling TLs.
So you were tracking how many days it took to actually sell a car.
I was tracking a rolling day average of my turn rate for each model.
So, and what did you want it to be, or what was it? Because
I always wanted my day supply to be somewhere between 60 and 90 days.
Okay.
So that if I had 80 TLs in stock and I was averaging selling 40 a month, I had a 60-day supply of cars.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. And that was based on what I had on hand and what I had incoming during that month. And the amount that I had incoming during that month would change as the month went on. The cars would start coming in. And so by the time you got towards the end of the month, you didn't have any more cars coming in. You were looking at the cars that were coming in the following month.
And I guess that just to, or Ray, I should call you Ray when we do these things. Ray, when, just to simplify it,
yeah,
or maybe really kind of like dumb it down. So
yeah.
the manufacturer, Acura, you would always call it the factory rep. The factory rep is sending you cars each month, right?
The way it works, it's a turn and earn system. The faster you turn cars, the faster you earn cars, the more cars you earn. And so they're always looking at the dealerships on hand supply to determine how many more cars to allocate. So you wanted to be selling them quickly so you could earn more cars.
And you wanted more cars so you could sell more cars so you could, got it.
So what I noticed was happening is we weren't selling more cars. We weren't selling as many cars as we had been, but they kept allocating as if I had been selling more cars. And they weren't just doing it to me, they were doing it to everybody because the last place the factory wants the cars is sitting on their lots, because when they're sitting on their lots, it's costing them money. And so they want them sitting on the dealer's lots, and they've gotten paid, and now it's costing the dealers money. So I noticed that instead of selling 40 TLs a month, we were, over the last 2 months, we might have averaged 35. And then it was down to 30. But they kept allocating 40 or 45. And so I noticed by like March or April that, my God, I had like 150-day supply of cars.
Was that of '08, March and April of '08?
Yes. So I had like 150-day supply of TLs. Like if I didn't get another TL and I was selling them at the rate that I was selling them at that time, it would have only taken me 5 months to sell out of what I had. Well, there's carrying charges for those 5 months that those cars are sitting on the ground. So that's when I told you the story. I had made arrangements to sell 30 of my TLs to a couple of dealers in California, so that I could bring my inventory level back down to something that was easier to handle, easier to carry, less expensive to carry. And of course, the factory didn't like that idea, because I was willing to sell the cars from our zone to a different zone. I didn't give a shit. I just want to get rid of the cars.
And you were working for a big, publicly traded,
Yes.
hundreds of dealerships. Yeah.
And my bosses were in favor of it, but wanted me to get the approval from our zone manager at Acura. And naturally, he went apoplectic when I sent him the email. And his response was, "How could you even think of doing something like that? And especially wanting to sell them into another zone." And my response was, "I'm starting to drown in cars here, and you don't seem to be cutting back the numbers you want to send us."
So it was April, March was when you started to see some signs that you could tell something was going.
By March, April, I already knew we were in trouble.
Gotcha.
The signs I saw earlier, but March, it was like, okay, the beginning of March, I said to myself, we have to do something about this. We have to alleviate this glut of cars, because we're never going to be able to sell out of them all in a reasonable amount of time. And you could tell at that point that sales overall, where we might have been averaging 100 cars a month, now all of a sudden, the new car side, we were down to 70 cars. So you could just sense that everything was moving in the wrong direction, on two fronts: the retail front and the incoming wholesale front that we were getting from Acura, because they didn't care that the retail side of things was slowing down. They just kept shipping us cars like nothing had happened. And they knew what had happened, but they didn't want them in their inventory. And so once my bosses saw the response from the zone manager, like, "How could you do this? This is, we won't be able to support you in the future when you have an issue." So my bosses said, "Okay, don't sell the cars." And I didn't. And then 3 weeks later, as cars kept coming in and piling up, and all the brands on our giant complex were suddenly overwhelmed with inventory, and we ran out of parking spaces, did my bosses finally say to me, "Well, I think you need to move those cars." Well, by that point, the rest of the world had figured out what I had figured out a few weeks earlier, and nobody would buy any cars from me. And it didn't matter if they were in California, or they were in Nebraska, or they were Pennsylvania. Nobody would buy any cars from me. No other Acura dealer was willing to take on additional inventory, because, well, they were being inundated from the manufacturer as well. And that was a sign to me that we were in deep, deep trouble. And things really started, as they say in the movies, the shit really hit the fan.
Yeah.
Because all the dealers noticed what was going on, and the manufacturers just kept shipping cars. And then in April, maybe we sold 60 new cars, and in May we sold 51 new cars. Now I say that. Now, that was a drop of 49% from our high water mark, and we sold 51, and we were still with 3 Acura dealerships in the Phoenix metro area. Our 51 new car sales was still the market leader. We sold more Acuras than any other Acura store in the Phoenix metro area. That and $2.10 would have bought me a cup of coffee before they fired me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when did they let you go? Because I remember
They let me go in June.
yeah. So you were leading, that dealership was still leading in that region.
We were, which was always one of Mr. Penske's key metrics, was to be the market leader in whatever market you were in.
Yeah.
Okay, for instance, we had a Volkswagen dealership when the complex first opened up, and it was the market leader in our market, and it was one of the top 10 volume Volkswagen dealerships in America. Okay, and we won the Wolfsburg Award for being a top dealership. Just between you and me, and you shouldn't share this with all the folks out there, the store was losing 7 figures a year. That's $1 million, isn't it?
Yeah.
6 figures. I don't know. It was losing over $1 million a year. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, this is a top 10 volume Volkswagen store, and we can't make any money at that store. Why would anybody want a Volkswagen dealership?
Yeah. Okay, but wait. So back to you though. So
yeah.
So you saw things back at the end of 07. You saw things.
My point is that Mr. Penske, he would overlook losing money if you were a market leader, if you were the volume dealer in your area, until the Great Recession, until 2008, until June of 2008, when, even though by a still significant margin, the Acura store was the volume leader, the market leader, I was given an option of, well, you can go to work at any of our other stores as a salesman, or you have a month to sell 100 new cars in June. And if you don't sell 100 new cars in June, well, then we're going to terminate you, or you can agree to leave, and there would be some type of severance package for you. So that was when I realized that it was no longer important to be the market leader, because what that got me was unemployed.
Yeah.
As you well know. And so the dilemma during the Great Recession is, well, if you became unemployed as a manager, there was really nowhere to go, because every store was experiencing the same type of difficulties. Every store was seeing sales declines of 40, 50, 60, and as it turned out, by August, as much as 85% declines at the Acura store. Because in the month of August, they sold 15 new cars. And I had the toughest time trying to find another job in a management position. Plus, I had to pay for somebody's bar mitzvah.
Sorry about that.
So, it worked out well. We ended up doing it at home, doing it.
Yeah. We don't have to.
And it was wonderful.
Wait, I wanna go back there, right?
Okay.
So end of 07,
yeah.
Start to pick up signs.
Yes, I started seeing.
Once you're in,
the way I tracked my inventory.
Yeah, which makes sense in a management role to do that. Then beginning of 08, you're starting to see things are going to be bad.
Yes.
Then it was by the summer of 08 that you were out of a job and everything.
Yeah, the shit hit. Yeah.
Now I want to juxtapose that with what's happened recently.
Yes.
Maybe it was the first signs where the news we were hearing out of China in February, maybe, that something could happen, if that even.
I remember hearing signs out of China in January, but I don't think it registered until the latter part of January, maybe the beginning part of February, that there might really be an issue. The big difference between what we're going through today and what we went through in 08 and 09 is, one was a man-made financial crisis, where the giant banks packaged and resold bad mortgages, which caused the financial collapse. And now it's a natural disaster, in the sense that it's a medical issue. It's a worldwide pandemic that has nothing to do with it being a man-made financial
No,
problem.
and I get that, but and you can make that case all day long, and you're
Yeah.
right. The biggest difference that I see from what you've explained happened in '08
Yeah.
is those dealers were still pushing inventory onto you. And what we're seeing now, at least what I read in automotive news, is the manufacturing plants are shut down. I mean, look at some of the American brands. They're
Yes.
manufacturing ventilators, not cars.
Yeah.
You know, so
The difference is that in '08 and '09, because of the financial collapse, the banks weren't willing to lend money. So it became harder and harder to obtain the lines of credit that were needed in order to be able to floor plan the cars.
and that's
And
from the dealership perspective. So
yes,
just like a consumer has to finance their car, the
yes.
dealership has to actually
And
finance
then
up a line of credit.
it became harder and harder for the consumer to be able to get car loans. So that was part of the problem. Now the problem is, everybody pretty much has a stay-at-home order. Manufacturers have their plants closed down to building cars at the moment. Dealerships are working with skeleton staffs because, instead of selling 150 cars a month, maybe if they're lucky this month, they'll sell 30 to 50 cars.
Yeah. And
So,
I think
and the other thing is there's not a lot there. There were things that the government could do to spur car sales during the Great Recession. One of them was cash for clunkers, where the government underwrote a program to where they encouraged people to trade in older cars, higher mileage cars, and they would get an extra incentive from the government. And that extra incentive would go to the dealers to make the selling price cheaper for the customers so that people could afford to do it. And if I remember correctly, it was it started as a $1 billion program, and and everybody blew through that billion in like 2 weeks, so then they added another billion to it. Okay, so that brought customers back into the marketplace to buy cars. But now the government can't do that. Social distancing is social distancing. Um, you
yeah,
know,
maybe we'll see something like that 6 months from now if the effects are prolonged, like they obviously were
well,
back in '07,
well,
'08, '09.
think of most showrooms for car dealers. Um, the salespeople have an office, small office. They have a desk. They sit behind the desk. There's 2 chairs in front of the desk, and everybody's, I don't know, is within 3 feet of each other. Okay, it's just the way it is. Now, how do you social distance? If you're a salesperson, how are you communicating and doing the negotiating when your customer is 6 feet from you, and you don't get
No,
that?
no, no. I trust me. I hear you loud and clear. You can't have car sales the way they've been traditionally in this current time for the
No,
foreseeable future
no.
until until the natural disaster related things you were describing are alleviated. But I think the point I'm trying to make is there was the oversupply during the Great Recession. There's
Yes.
opportunity here that since actually supply is decreasing, probably not in direct, alignment with demand decreases, which we've already seen, but there could be a nice pop of pent up demand and actually not an over gluttony of supply.
At some point, the problem was, um, the problem for dealers now is all the inventory that they had on the ground prior to, you know, states saying, yeah, you're an essential business, but well, you're not quite that essential. So we don't want you open as a normal business, but we want you open. So
The service drives open, the sales department, not really. Yeah.
yeah, so that there was a ton of inventory on most lots prior to basically shutting down. And that inventory is just going to sit. It's going to age before they get a chance to sell it. There's going to be carrying costs
Yeah.
before they have a chance to sell it, if the dealership remains in business. And I'm sure dealerships that were on thin financial ice before, the people that are holding the floor plan are certainly hoping these people figure out a way to stay in business, because they don't want to
Else
have
they'll go bankrupt if they.
yeah, they don't want to have to dispose of those cars.
Do you think
So
we'll end up seeing consolidation in the dealership world? Because obviously, if you file for bankruptcy, you restructure the assets and debts. And you could see maybe the Auto Nations of the world and the Mile Ones and the Penske's just buying up
I
the mom
don't,
and pops.
I'm not sure that I would say that you would see that type of consolidation. I think what you'll see is in any given market. And what you have to realize is that most markets are overrepresented by any particular brand. There was at one point 3 Audi dealerships in the Baltimore region. Now I think there's 4 or 5. So the manufacturers just always think, well, no, we should just add more dealerships. Well, when you add more dealerships, what happens is some of them don't remain as profitable or even profitable at all once there's that extra bit of competition. So what I think might happen is there'll be a thinning of the herd in the sense that those that weren't on good financial footing to begin with will go out of business. And because it'll be quite some time, I think, before we see sales return to the 17 million new units a year, that nobody will be looking to buy those facilities or reopen those facilities anytime soon. I think if there's 5 Nissan dealerships in a marketplace and suddenly there's 3, the 3 that remain are going to be, and I think the manufacturer will be very happy that those 3 can end up being profitable and they can stay in business rather than giving each of them a thinner piece of the pie.
And through the bankruptcy and the restructuring, those 3 will, instead of buying the facilities, they'll buy the inventory. They'll hold on to it.
Yeah. The inventory will get shifted. If the floor plan holder is Nissan Motor Acceptance Corporation, they'll take the cars back and how to disperse them. But the point is, I think there'll be less dealerships of every particular brand, making the remaining dealerships of those brands healthier, and more able to survive a downturn than what we have today. So
I agree.
I don't see like Penske going on a buying spree or Group One.
I get it.
Yeah, I just see a thinning of the herd and a strengthening of the dealers that do remain.
Yeah, I get that, and I agree with that. And I also think it's in alignment with the idea that dealerships play a different role in the future of the buying process as well, that we've talked about. You don't necessarily need as many, because they're going to be doing more things at the customer's home, for example. But I got one more question for you on this topic, and then we'll wrap, which is, what changes did you see? So obviously you got let go June of 2008, and then I know we as a family moved to the East Coast, and you got some different roles, some different jobs.
Yeah.
All in the car business, except for that one. That one was kind of weird, but we don't have to talk about it. No, I'm just teasing. But what changes did you see? What changes did you see after the Great Recession? Because I'm wondering if maybe there'll be some similar things that happen after this pandemic.
I don't know that. I just saw dealers. They figured out how to work with less people. They cut back some of their expenses. The good dealers and the good dealer groups really took a close look at their expenses for both personnel, employee expenses, and expenses in other areas. I remember one of the things that we cut back before I was let go, we had a thank you bag that we gave out to every customer who bought a new or used car at Acura or Scottsdale. And there was a t-shirt, and there was a hat, and there was a pen, and there was a magnetic calendar for your refrigerator, and a couple other items, and a koozie for your cold
all
drink.
The tchotchkes.
Exactly. And our cost on that was about $25 per bag for all the stuff that was in there. And that was one of the first things that the area vice president said, no more of that. because if you're selling 100 cars a month and you're giving out $25 to every customer, that's $2,500. So there was an expense that could be cut. Bottled water became an expense, and that was a tough expense to cut in Arizona. But bottled water became an item that could be cut, and they would put in reverse osmosis machines, water machines within the dealerships so that we wouldn't have to be buying bottled water all the time. So there were all kinds of areas where they just looked at expenses that in the past, nobody would say anything, but when you really have to start looking at every penny and every dollar, you make some choices that where you go, yeah, I'd like to be able to give them a gift, but right now it's not the time. And there's a $2,500 savings there, and there's a $500 savings on bottled water, and there's $1,000 savings on something else, and that shit adds up. And so dealers learned to run lean. They learned to really watch their expenses, and then within a couple of years they all forgot, and they went back to doing the same old shit they were doing before. And my guess is that most of them are needing to look at their expenses again now and going, well, we don't really need this or we don't really need that.
Well, that's the case because we've heard stories locally of mom and pop dealerships laying people off, and then obviously you don't have to look far for the big public ones that are furloughing thousands.
CarMax is laying off 15,000 people. 15,000. Okay, so yes, they're all going to look for expenses that they can cut, whether it be vendor expenses, for digital advertising, whatever it is, they're going to look for things to cut. I think the difference is that they're going to cut some expenses and increase others in the sense that they're going to learn how to do online retailing, which, the bottled water, which you go into any dealership anywhere in the United States, you can get a bottle of water where they have the coffee machines or the free sodas or this. Well, if people aren't going to dealerships, you're not going to need that in the future. So the money that you were spending on that can go to a vendor that can help you set up your online retailing, so that you can get into the new world of car sales. The money you save on those ancillary items can go towards the lower level employees that you're going to pay on an hourly basis that are actually going to drive the car to the customer and deliver the car. Because you're not going to have your salespeople go deliver the car. So the expenses will get drawn out in a slightly different manner. The way they retail cars will change dramatically. And then someday, 5-10 years from now, when you're allowed to go back to football stadiums and shit.
Hopefully sooner than that, man. I want to see Kyler Murray throw a touchdown pass to DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, well, and CD Lamb.
We'll see what happens on the draft, but yeah.
I want to see that too. But my point is that it's going to be a while before it gets back to the 17 million new cars annual sales.
Yeah, but if I know anything about the car business, what you've taught me over the years, they're going to figure out ways to make money. If it is through that thinning of the herd or whatever, if it's through online, they're going to figure it out. There's billions, trillions of dollars tied up in the car business.
They'll figure it out, but I think the big change will be the thinning of the herd, okay, and online retailing, so that you could have, if you have an area that has, I don't know, take the Baltimore area, Baltimore, Washington area. I mean, how many BMW dealerships are there? 10, 12? Do you really need that many? Would it be okay if instead of 12, there was 7? And the 7, and if people don't have to drive, if the whole model changes to when it's time for service, you let us know, we come and pick it up. That's going to happen and stay. Because if you're doing it for people now, they're going to want it when things get back to normal. Okay, and if the business model becomes you buy the car and we take it to you, well, it doesn't take 12 facilities to do that.
No, no, we're on the same page. All right, let's leave the conversation there. We'll pick it back up tomorrow. This is good though. This is a lot of good information, a lot of good insight for just people in general to understand what happened back in the Great Recession and what could happen here. And honestly, no one
Well,
knows.
yeah, well, nobody knows, but this seems to me like it'll be worse than the Great Recession, which is why the federal government has already agreed to invest how many trillions of dollars so far?
Um,
Four
I
trillion?
just want them to pass us a trillion, but we can't seem to make that
I,
happen.
I just want the state of Maryland to already say they're going to disperse some of my unemployment.